Welcome to the Hudson Area Library. My name is Brenda Schufeld. For those of you who don't know, I'm the program director at the library. And we're very happy to have Matthew Frederick here to talk about future Hudson. We do a lot of history of Hudson, and now we're going to move into the future. It's Future Hudson and Urban Designers Imaginings, What Ifs, and Why Nots. So even though this is about the future, I kind of saw this as, in a way, part of the local history series, because I think a lot of people in Hudson are thinking about the history of our town as we're also thinking about moving into the future. And hopefully that history will inform us to not make some mistakes that have been made and move forward. Before we begin, I just wanted to tell you about some of our events coming up. On June 7th, also a Thursday at 6 o'clock, is Know Your Flag, the history of the American flag and Flag Day. And this is going to be with Dan Shaughnessy of the Elks Lodge and 2 members of the Hudson Flag Day Parade Committee. So there'll be historic flags from the lodge that will be displayed, and we'll be talking a lot about not only the history, but the proper care of the American flag. And that'll be right the Thursday before Flag Day. I'm very excited about this event. And we'll have historic photos from parades, which we all know Hudson loves a parade, and with flags in them. So. And then on June 21st, we have an actual local history speaker series event that we're teaming up with the Leisler Institute. This one is A Taste of Change, handwritten cookbooks as documents of social and family history by Peter G. Rose. And you are welcome to bring your own handwritten family cookbooks with you, and there will be a discussion period, but it's a great topic for us to learn about. And then finally in June, we have another Thursday, June 28th. We'll have a film screening of Odds Against Tomorrow, and we will be seeing the trailer from David McDonald's documentary film about the filming of Odds Against Tomorrow in Hudson. So we'll have both, and we're going to have vintage snow caps and Good and Plenty and things like that, and popcorn. So we hope that you can make that. That's the 28th, June 28th. Those are our upcoming events, and you probably saw when you were signing in outside, we also have a donation box. We do have all of our public programs are free and open to the public, and we really try to create programs that will serve the public. So we do hope you'll think of us on your way out for donations. And we also have Matthew Frederick's books for sale. So he has 2 new books that have just come out this month. One is 101 Things I Learned in Urban Design School, and these are just made so beautifully. The other one is 101 Things I Learned in Advertising School, and then there's reissuing of 101 Things I Learned in Engineering School, and 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. So Matthew's been to a lot of schools. Those are for sale, thanks to Spotty Dog offering them, sending them to us. So on to our talk. Matthew Frederick is an architect, an urban designer, and the author of the best-selling 101 Things I Learned book series. And he's the creator of that book series. And his latest book, 101 Things I Learned in Design School, is out this month and will be available for sale after the program. He lives in the city of Hudson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you, and goodbye. Any event, even a small one, just takes so much work. So, Brenda, I really appreciate it. And I arrived and you were funny and making me laugh and not worrying about what I had to talk about. And so I've since forgotten. Let me thank a couple other people. Yes, Spotty Dog for arranging for the books to be here, and you'll see Paul, who set us up today. Thank you, Paul, Dan Udell, and WGXC. Thank you, Dan's up at the camera. Those of you watching on WGXC are going to have to squint really hard to see it on the radio. My literary agent in life, Sword Fairbank, is in the second row, and somewhere in the back row is my editor from Penguin Random House, Matt. Matt, thank you for coming up. So what the evening looks like, I'm pretty sure you guys are here because you want to see what might Hudson look like in the future. I have no say in the matter. I'm just a guy who has a lot of ideas. Some harebrained, so you'll see some of them. But I'm also hoping to stick around and buy some books. So I'm going to talk about my books just briefly, show you a little bit of them, and then we'll talk about urban design. And what I want to do is show you how principles from 101 Things I've Learned at Urban Design School can maybe help us see Hudson in a more informed way. I don't have to tell you guys that Hudson is politically contentious. And when it comes to new development, everybody has their ideas of what should happen, and they use those ideas and interests to kind of beat everybody else over the head with them. So I'm hoping that maybe we can all get on the same page in terms of agreeing what good urban design is, and I hope my book can help you do that. So just quickly, the series, and then I'll move into the urban design, and I'll go as be as economical as I can. Because I think you guys have some questions and some points you want to make. These are the two new books, and they all look like that inside. 101 lessons that look, oops, that's not my laser pointer, there it is. And let's back up. They all look like this inside. This grew out of a handout that I did for my architecture students when I started teaching years ago. A simple lesson, one paragraph or two, and a drawing to keep it company, and I do that 101 times. And the reason is that architecture school was so confusing that students graduate thinking, I don't know that I've learned anything. Everything moves and shifts, everything you learn does the last thing you learn. So I wanted to create 101 lessons that would hold fairly still and just learn that one thing. If that page doesn't do it for you, then turn the page and try something else. This is from the first book of architecture schools. This is from 2007. This book's been out a long time, and it sells in a bazillion copies. Practical lessons, anything that'll help beginning students. Students need to know how to draw perspectives, but also philosophical lessons that will help you get your feet under you as a student. The difference between the subjective and objective engagement of reality. Clearly, the architect has to live in the world of the engineer as well as the artist, the objective world, the subjective world. What does that mean? So this is the beginning of that conversation. By the way, you're not meant to read this. You can't read that, right? But I think you can read that. Sort of? Okay, good. This is from the advertising book which just came out. Art is the idea, not the image. The point here is to tell the student who can't draw well, don't worry about it. That's not what the art is. The art is what you're trying to represent. So draw stick figures if you have to. So it's philosophical as well as practical. Another practical lesson, in this case, the practical place being, if you're designing a logo, try not to make it look like a man flavoring himself. And a few lessons from the urban design book, just quickly, because I've really seen a bunch of these. At the fourth floor, we begin to lose identity with the street. So at the second floor, we can have conversations briefly with people down below. At the third floor, we might be able to recognize people, but it's really hard to talk. But we can see if something's going wrong down there, right? If somebody's getting mugged, or if a kid's wandering out the street. When you get to the fourth floor, start to tune out the street and observe the rooftops and the horizon below. And I like to provoke students with ideas. Everything going up now is made of glass, but glass buildings aren't necessarily more open. They actually have a way of making life feel like it's hermetically sealed. So a few thoughts on that. So let's say it again. I'm going to use this one to illustrate something here in Hudson. Elevate to honor, lower to humble. That seems pretty obvious. If you're building a monument to war victory, such as this is the World War I monument in Kansas City, Missouri. It goes up on a hill, and you build it tall. if you've been to the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C., you descend into that monument. And it's a very moving experience. It's a humbling experience. It's an admission, at least on the part of the architect, Maya Lin, that we weren't triumphant in Vietnam. So how might this apply to Hudson? Well, we're not talking about monuments, but whether you raise or lower something a little bit can make a big difference. A foot or two, whether it's a house relative to the sidewalk or a public building, can really affect the way you perceive it. You guys know this building, right? Who is not from Hudson here? Only a couple. Okay, so I'm assuming you guys know Hudson, but I'll try to fill in as I recall. So this is the police station. I believe the police moved in here about 2 years ago now. They were actually right in our backyard. I'm on Union Street, and they used to be on Warren. This was an existing building. It was a fitness center. You guys probably remember it, right? How do you feel about this as a civic building? Functional, actually, the cops love it. The court workers love it, at least the ones I've talked to. So yeah, it's really nice inside. The old building was not a good building. But as a public building, well, hidden behind the top bar of this fence is the sign that says Hudson City Court System. We're down below the street. We're next to railroad tracks. That's always a little dicey building next to railroad tracks because of what that implies. Wrong side of the tracks, right side of the tracks. It implies industrial area, wasteland. So it's really tough to put a civic building in a location like this. But given that we did, what if we had just paid a little more attention to this issue of raising to celebrate or assert? Does that give us a little more presence, maybe? And not only that, but you might have noticed that the highest thing in this building are the toilet room vents. So, really good opportunity to hide that. And this is exciting to me where this is an urban design problem and it's an architecture problem. So a building built on a suburban site maybe only has responsibility for itself, but as soon as you build on an urban site, you have responsibilities to the community. This lesson is avoid, avoid. And these drawings might be a little hard to see. This is Philadelphia City Hall at the end of Broad Street. This is simply a tree-lined street, and this is a curved street, sort of the European medieval model. And these are all good streets because they resolve themselves. This very formally, this one resolves itself simply because the trees go to the end and touch, and so you're not left with a void at the end of the street. And this street curves and kind of gives you a sense, hey, what's around the corner? What's down there? And it kind of leads you down. So let's look at one of the entrances into Hudson. This is Green Street. What corner of the city is this? Eastern? Hudson's really weird because when I walk up Warren Street, I feel like I'm going north. You're not, you're going southeast, right? So it really messes with you. We all come into the city this time, probably with some frequency, and you're left with this odd view of the backside of the hotel. There's an auto repair garage. It's really hard to tell what's going on. Let me just look. Actually, I can locate it here. So here's Green Street. This is the 7th Street Park. So the grid runs this way. The river's down there. So when you come in Green Street, you're looking at the back of the hotel. And I was wondering, how can I solve this problem? Again, it's an architecture problem and an urban design problem. The hotel faces the park. That's a great siting for a hotel facing a park with a public civic presence. A neat thing about hotels is, though, they can have a front door and back door that work equally well. One can be the drop-off, one can be the formal pedestrian side. So I was looking at this and saying, could I go back here and maybe solve the problem by making a better hotel, or at least adding on to the hotel. So I tried this out. Now that might not be your taste architecturally, but as you head toward that, you have a sense that, okay, this street leads me somewhere. It makes some sense. And by the way, I took some other license here. Just this curb line. You're going to have to buy the book now because that little plaza. This is in front of Deb's Lil and Vassallo's and whatever else is there. That's actually in the book. I used that island. Right now, let me go back a couple. Oh, there. So this is a little monument. What is it? It's a... How many people have actually walked up to it to see what it is? Well, it's more than I thought, but it's still it's really isolating that traffic pattern. So the lesson that I'm not illustrating is you can often, without adversely affecting traffic, you can create that kind of a plaza, engage it to the streets. You create a plaza where you can have outdoor seating for a cafe and so forth, and particularly if there are trucks going through. Traffic can still get through the intersection via ordinary motor vehicle traffic can move through it. So I'm taking that license. And then one other approach here too, if you don't like the hotel idea, what if we just extend the street wall through? And this, I like this, I'm not sure which I like better. What I do like about this though is that when I come down Green Street, I start back here where I am, and the street kind of curves, and then eventually straightens out, and I get the feeling, hey, I'm approaching something organized, the city grid. And I come down here, but wait a second, the street wall deflects me, and then I come into the 7th Street Park at an angle. And it's a really interesting sequence, because once I see the 7th Street Park, I kind of say, oh, I get it. Now I've got the organization of the whole city right here. So it's really neat to have this deflection into the city, arrive at the park, and then that's the beginning of the grid. Let's go to the, around that corner to the 7th Street Park. This is probably too hard to see, so I think a park, the lesson is a park is a wide spot on a path. What does that mean? Well, let me give you a couple of examples. Yes, okay, so there's a bigger look. Now this is not exactly the 7th Street Park, but it is in the book. You can tell it was inspired though, can't you? 7th Street. So I dropped the alley out that runs through, and I got rid of the angled street, Green Street, Columbia, right here. And I wanted to, this is in the book, it was on my mind at the time. This scheme for the orthogonal pathways was in the public discussion a couple of years ago. You might recall that there was some funding available to revision the park. And of course it didn't happen because it's HUDSON. Everybody disagreed on what should happen. But one of the things that was floated was that historically, this was here, there was the statue of Venus in the center. But there was this orthogonal pathway system. The problem with that kind of pathway system in a grid is this. Now it seems like you're honoring the grid, right? The city's on a right angle, let's put the paths on a right angle. But actually, let's look at this. Here's where you cross the street to get to the park. So, doesn't that actually receive you better? If you're doing this, and you go to exit the park here, you're crossing it mid-block. So things that seem obvious to you in urban design, when you really put yourself in the moment, how do I experience it? It could be a very counterintuitive decision. And speaking of counterintuitive, I only know this as the Park. What is it called?
The Park.
The Park, okay. PARC, I don't know what the acronym is, and a park. So for those of you that don't know HUDSON, I took this picture with my back to Warren Street, that's our main street, and so Warren runs like this. And this cuts across the city for 3 or so blocks. HUDSON has very long blocks in this direction. It's also a lesson in the book. If you go over about 550 feet, you really should have some cut-throughs. And HUDSON's blocks are 800, 900 feet long. If you ever park your car on the wrong end and you have to go around to find it, you know how long those blocks are. So this was a good idea with this cut-through. But there really is not an understanding of how people engage pathways and parks, and the idea that a park should be a wide spot on a path. Who's behind that wall? Do I want to go down these steps and find out? I don't know. So maybe I'll take this way. Oh, wait a second. By the time I get down here, I got to double all the way back. So this park does not get used unless there's a scheduled event like a film going on. It almost never gets used. So if this had been designed, you could have done a couple of things. The steps down could have come off of the side. This is the Warren Street sidewalk. If you had stepped down into the park from Warren Street, that might have made sense. And then you're working with the slope of the land, and you can put your movie screen at the end of it. And so the landscape works with the idea of showing movies. But this park is just so counterintuitive. The reason why it fails is not because it's a cut-through. That's a great idea. It's because somebody was not simply looking at the basic question of how do people move through space. Let's go back to 7th Street Park again. This picture's a couple years old, and it doesn't look any better now, does it? So the park has these street walls. You can't see the bottom end here, but street walls like this the whole way around the park. But this end has a Citgo station. Everybody complains about the Citgo station. Ugly, ugly, ugly. I don't think the problem is the Citgo station. I think the problem is that we prefer enclosed spaces to open spaces. Wait, what? Open space is good, right? We want open space in our cities, but if you look at where people hang out, they hang out in spaces that have a degree of enclosure to them. So when you are on, what's this, Park Place, you have this nice street wall on the right, 3 stories, and behind you, and on the other side of the street. But as you look down here, it doesn't matter that it's a Citgo station. I'm seeing all this open sky. I'm seeing these buildings that don't line up with the sidewalk. Why would I go down there? It feels like the city just vanishes on me. So there's this, and it's not just a question of going down to that site. If you're on the other end of the park and you want to move toward it, it tends to dissuade you from moving into the park as well as through it. There's a bunch of things wrong with the 7th Street Park I'd like to see fixed. I won't go into all of them. So here I just want to talk about how to fix that edge. So you've got the open edge, spatial leak, like the designer would put it. You can look at this rather literally. If you look at a street or a public plaza in cross-section, it's almost like a container, like a cup, a vessel. You can almost fill it up with water. So we need to plug a leak here. So what if we were to change this vehicle circulation pattern to something like this and build on that site, and we can still squeeze in a Citgo station? And if I recall, in Boston, they love their Citgo sign. So Citgo signs can't possibly be bad, right? And why not put a beer garden in while we're at it? And what better? Could there be a better idea than to have drunk people in the vicinity of 1,000? There's a million reasons why you couldn't do this, but I wanted to show you this kind of thing. If you can get interested or excited and say, well, we can't build that, but it's fun. What else could we do in Hudson that might be fun like that? Okay, this isn't as much fun. Second word. This is tough. For those of you who don't know Hudson, this would be the northern corner of the city. So the grid, here's the river. You can just see the corner of it. And north is straight up. So this is the northern corner. So here you get what we might call fabric. Right? There's sort of a texture of buildings of similar scale and over here. And then all of a sudden, all these gaps. And this building, Bliss Tower, low-income housing, which looks nothing like the rest of Hudson. And then we get this stuff, which is suburban garden-style apartments. Looks nothing like the rest of Hudson. Here's Warren Street, right here. Am I pointing to? Yeah, that's Warren. It's a block and a half. It feels like it's a long way away from Warren Street. So what can we do to fix this? So there's so many things we need to focus on. I'll just do 2 lessons here. One is honor the street wall. Urban places need strong street walls. So blow it up here for you. This on the left, this looks like most of Hudson, doesn't it? Made of fabric buildings or background buildings. This is an object building. It's very simple terminology, but does this help you see what's going on over there in the second word? This is how urban places, by and large, should be built. It's not to say you can't do some of this, but that usually wants to be a building of civic importance, such as center of government. Could be a library. This is kind of an object building that we're in, although it also is fairly close to the street. And another lesson, no, didn't I hit another one in there? Let's see. Oh, I guess I covered my fabric lesson, so I combined them here. So object building, fabric building, and honor the street wall. So let's see what we can do here. So another look at the second word, looking straight down. First of all, I need to repair some streets that were taken away, so let's put this street back. Is that called Court Street or something? And let's put this alley back in, and maybe we even straighten Front Street. And then I'm looking at extending this alley, which I don't think ever was, but what I'm trying to do is just give you enough of a grid. Okay, now we can make some street wall buildings and we can build some fabric. Before I do that, this up here, this site is owned by Kite's Nest, which is a fantastic organization that provides programs for kids and teens, everything from after-school programs to cooking classes to summer workshops on civic involvement. So they had a building here that burned. They weren't in it. They're headquartered elsewhere in the city. So the question is, what do they do? Well, I'm going to give them a nice big site for their urban agriculture and maybe some community gardens. But in return, I want them, let's move them up the street. Can I get them to come up here? And now I've got a street that leads somewhere. And now I can build a little bit of fabric that looks a little bit like the rest of Hudson. Maybe the Bliss Tower doesn't feel so lonely. I can give it a little more company. The question comes up all the time, can you replace Bliss Tower with low-rise buildings? First of all, I'm not arguing that you should or should not. That's a very complex question. But if you look at the footprint of Bliss Tower, that's a 9-story building, so divided by 3. If I repeat that footprint 3 times around the site, I pretty much cover the amount of interior space that Bliss does. But one way or another, I'd love to see some real streetscape here. And does that, a simple diagram I'm showing here, but does that look like it could look a little bit more like the rest of Hudson? And if I stand here, this is a lesson on street walls too, so I stand here and look down here. I know there's one person here that lives in this building. This is a long brick building called Providence Hall. There it is on the left. And here's Bliss Tower is outside the picture to the right. And here's some of the low-rise suburban stuff. And it's just not the worst environment I've seen, but it's just not a walking environment. So what if we say, well, let's build some street walls here. Let's make this an urban place. How about some places where people in the second ward can work and have jobs, and they can shop, and they can browse in stores and feel like they are in their own neighborhood. This feels maybe a little too strong. I could have pushed it back a little bit, maybe not gone quite as tall. But on the other hand, this building sits back much farther than the Warren Street buildings do. And I think it'd be interesting if this could be built out. Some ground floor shops that come out toward the street. Time. A few more. The waterfront. Oh boy. This has been subject to so much study, discussion, and argument. So here's the city grid. This is a former industrial area that is totally formless. And this is the Wick Hotel, which opened about a year ago. That's very nice to see, but it's very lonely. They tore this down so they could at least get a view of the cement facility. This building, the CAS, is supposed to come down, and there's all kinds of talk about this being redeveloped. This warehouse it's huge. It has some interesting stuff going on. It seems incredible in terms of being reprogrammed with activities. The Basilica is an old industrial building that looks like a basilica form and has programs in arts and theater and all kinds of interesting things. But look how lonely it is down there. When you go down there, this is the Amtrak station. But when you go down here, you drop someone at the Amtrak station, you go back home. You go back the way you came. You don't wander, you don't explore. You can't get, you can get out this way, out of the city, but it's hard work. So this is almost it. Once you get below 3rd Street, which is over here, once you get west of 3rd Street, this whole end of the city is almost a dead end. It's really inconvenient to get in and out of. So anyway, that's one of the problems. So there's no shape down here. So I wanted to look at some ways to give this some shape so that new developers actually, new buildings are talking to each other in some way. So this is the first lesson in the book. Urbanism is about relationships, not parts. Buildings have to talk to each other, and they become stronger for having done it. Another lesson, which relates to the previous one about relationships, is how you can activate a street. Now that diagram is complicated, so I'll give you a very simple one. You've all been to the shopping mall, all right? Here's Macy's, and here's Nordstrom's, and here's all the little stores in between. Every mall is based on this principle. The big stores attract visitors, a lot of people. Some of them walk to the other end, and that activates the interior street of the mall. It activates it socially and economically. Students love this because they've hung out at the mall their whole childhood. They know how it works. There's an actual principle to it. So if you can identify urban anchors, and frequently new projects are big, much bigger than the old stuff, right? So if you can locate those in such a way that your new project does this and your old stuff is the stuff in between, now you can activate the street that maybe is lacking in life. So I was down on Allen Street. This is an old school building that had been vacant and underused for many years. It's now being turned into, I believe, live workspaces, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see it's on a hill, and if I take a few more steps to my right here and turn around, I see this. There's an open space. You can see it's sloping downhill, another street, 2 houses, and with apologies to the owner of this one who still lives there, but not this one, who's selling it. And if I take some trees down, with apologies to the woodpeckers, you would see the basilica framed by Mount Reno. So these relationships are here, but they're hidden. Here's a view. There's the house, actually the schoolhouse, and there's the basilica, right on axis, directly lined up with the geometry of the rest of Hudson. And let's do one more. Here is the train station. I'm going to draw a line from the train station, which happens to hit an existing street right here called Montgomery Place Street, which is a dead-end street. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it used to go through because you can see hints of it, which that's Tanner's Lane, but you can see hints here, right between the Wick Hotel and the Kaz. So I thought, wow, that potentially organizes an awful lot of real estate down here. So this will go pretty quick here because I've got to jump to the actual scheme. So hopefully that's not too big a jump, but here's your axis, a suggestion that we have a mall, not an interior mall, a pedestrian mall, sort of a lowercase version of a Romulus perhaps, or a Santa Monica, what's it called, 3rd Street, 3rd Avenue Mall. Lined by buildings. This is the Wick, and we get a public space. These are our Hudson Spanish steps leading down from the school building to the fountain and terminated by the basilica at the end. So the basilica gets some company. The street from the Montgomery Court runs through right on axis with the train station. So when you come in and drop your friend off, actually let's come in this way because then you get to see the station, drop your friend off and continue on your way. And what are these buildings? I don't know. Where do people park? I don't know. But it has a shape based on some relationships. And let's keep moving so you can get to asking your questions. If it can't be urban now, make it easy for it to become urban later. Unfortunately, a lot of what an urban designer does is suburban or quasi-urban stuff. So this lesson, I don't know if you can see the drawing, but the idea is, look, if you're going to build single-family houses, set back on lots, centered, well, it's going to be impossible for that to get any denser because the property line runs right through. So what if you built the houses toward the street and to one side? Now, or in the future, when zoning liberalizes and we can densify, you can build more housing. You can do this. So I was looking a couple years ago at this part of Hudson. So here's the grid. Second word, Bliss Tower is somewhere here. Is that it? There it is. Okay. So at the time, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, the Common Council president said, hey, we have some property out there behind the high school. We should sell that, make some money. Well, actually it turned out we did know, I guess. I think the school district owns it, and they made a solar field out of it. But anyway, at the time I thought, if that gets developed, it's going to be suburban sprawl. Do you know this development here? What is this? No. Where's the... Oh, the Crosswinds isn't even on here. This is an old picture. There's a, do you know the Crosswinds?
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody that lives in the Crosswinds, I apologize if you do, but if you're going anywhere, you're probably going in your car. Okay? You're not doing what somebody coming out the door on Union Street does, and then just walk to Warren Street for your morning coffee. So I was wondering, is there a way to link that to Hudson and actually think about this as an urban potential? So convenient little inexpensive viaduct, and we can connect 3rd Street. 3rd Street this is where 3rd Street now ends. It used to go down the hill. If you look at old illustrations of Hudson, down, very steep hill, but it went down and connected to this industrial area, sort of dump area. And what if we then take some known points? This one lines up with the high school, which is a wonderful facade, one of the best in Hudson. Lines up. I'm sorry, middle school, excuse me, middle school, that's the high school, the middle school. This is an existing entry point for traffic. What if we bring that through? This is along the edge of the field, kind of used as a haul road. And what if we build it out a little bit with streets? Maybe some housing, and does that look a little bit like this? And there's your North Hudson neighborhood. Okay, I'm not trying to sell you books. I'm trying to sell you books, not urban design books. But it's a little surprising, right? I mean, are you kidding? That's like half again of Hudson built again, but it's possible. And some of you guys might say, I don't think so. There's some woodland there, and we don't want to destroy that. Yep. So where do you want to destroy woodland? Because whatever growth doesn't happen here is happening somewhere else. So what I'm trying to sell you on here is that even if you're taking some of nature away, you're saving it elsewhere, plus the people who live here now have a walkable environment. One hopes mixed use and houses and shopping and all kinds of good things. So I'm going to leave you with that. If your reaction is ooh or uh-oh, well, imagine when the proprietors arrived and decided that they were going to lay this city out. I don't think they stood here and looked across the landscape and said, ooh. They saw possibility. And here we are a couple hundred years later saying, this is awesome. Thank you. We love this. This place is so important to us. We want to keep it as it is, or as close as it could. The problem is that keeps us backward looking. And I want you to look at Hudson and look to the future and say, what will we give people that in 100 years they will love? Now, the problem is we have all kinds of regulations that prevent this from happening today, right? Zoning, there's all kinds of property lines that cut through there, so how do you get everybody on the same page to even want to do this? But it doesn't matter where we are. Even if we're back at the waterfront, if we're in the second ward, we're not getting much of anything done in Hudson. Why is this? These guys who built this, and women who built this, have far less means than us. What are we doing wrong? I think part of the problem is we're trying to do it all at once. Urbanism is a wicked problem. So systems theorists use the term wicked problem to describe a problem that is really a tangle of sub-problems. And if you try to solve one of the sub-problems, hold it still, and move on to the other sub-problem, that solution undoes the first one, and everything ends up moving. So a wicked problem you can't really solve perfectly. You can't do it all at once. So what I would recommend to Hudson is two things. Number one, wherever you're building, create a strong framework based on sound urban design principles. A big framework. I gave you a big framework down on the waterfront. It might not be the right one, but it's big, it's holistic. Don't develop it at once. That's the second advice. Develop it incrementally. When you develop incrementally, that's what our buddies did when they built Hudson. They built it incrementally. And you know what? They made all kinds of mistakes. I could walk you around Hudson and show you building after building that got it wrong. The windows are in the wrong place. That it's too high, it's too low, the proportions are bad. And yet here we are fighting over this stuff 200 years later saying that poorly proportioned building needs to be maintained exactly as it is. Well, maybe, maybe not. I think if we can become more forward-looking, maybe we'll stop fighting the old battles. Thanks. You guys are probably going to have questions about different proposals. I don't want to call them proposals. Ideas, brainstorms, whatever. So I can come back through this if there's something you have a question. What I'm going going to try not to do, though, is debate the merits of the proposals. What I really want to talk about are the principles, if you can. The principles that drove some of these. Kimberly.
I was thinking, I think a lot, well, some greenery, but, places where people can play and walk, where would that be? Would that be in the front, or would that be in some kind of back?
So I would say that very generally there's sort of two kinds of public recreational spaces. One is the pocket park. And we have a few of those. There's the one next to the Mexican radio. I don't think it has a name. There's I think it's called Thurston Park. Down in Lower Warren. And then there are sort of the urban edge parks, where they're more freeform. And there's different kinds of activities. So if you're walking a dog, you want more of a freeform park. If you're playing tag and frisbee, you might want more of a freeform park. But if you're just looking for a place to bounce a ball, that should be right outside your door, or it should be just right down the street. So I don't want to be sending people out to the edges of the city just to have a place to bounce a ball. So there's a lot of places to bounce a ball in the Second Ward, but they're not fun. That wide open State Street with no edge to it, it's not fun. So I think making more built edges is a way of making more recreational space. Can be. Brenda?
Yeah, I just wondered how much, when you were planning streets, especially down by the river, how much you use some of the historic maps that are available, because I know from people who've come to research that there are actually a lot of streets that were taken out,
Right.
even before urban renewal.
You're talking down to the waterfront, right?
Yeah, I think so, like down Front Street and
Franklin Street.
Franklin Street.
So there, I forget the names of the streets. So was Franklin the one that ran right here?
Yes.
Yep. So now the old drawings show Franklin running basically along the tracks, and some of the drawings it looks like it connects to the bridge. It doesn't. It actually went, to my knowledge, went under it and then kind of dead ended. But yeah, should that be put back? Some folks are saying, well, look, you've got this street through the middle of this, what could be a great recreational area. What if we got rid of that street, slid it over here, restored Franklin, and maybe did tie it into the new eventual bridge? That might be a really nice way of creating an open rec space. And it's almost, to me, when I look at it becomes easier, I think, to understand that as an open rec space, recreation space, when you understand where you are in the city. But when you're just looking at openness, why go there? Yes?
So, it seems to me when you go down where the cement plant stuff is, that feels like it's sort of filled in, and the old maps and stuff that it was, I guess, water, and it would be water again, probably sooner than later. Why wouldn't you just let some of that fill back, fill it and just get rid of some of this stuff down here, since, maybe keep, like the silica, obviously, the things we want to keep, just it gives such a beautiful, sort of water area that kind of becomes part of the city a little bit,
Well, I'm following the lead of, I guess, a more general conversation in Hudson. That is, they're having studies done at the waterfront, up through here, all the way down and around. And there is an intent to build here, so I'm kind of following the lead. All right, if you're going to build, here's maybe a way to do it. But yeah, the old shoreline, I don't even know where it is.
It just seems sort of crazy. It seems when you look at these flood maps, like 20-year flood maps and stuff, it's like, where are we going to go?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the directions I think we're going to go. So why would we build anything down here if it's underwater in 30 years, right?
Or why would you build them up?
Right. So to be honest, I kind of cried uncle on that one as far as developing the schemes, but I'm wondering that too. Should we maybe build everything on one story in now? And maybe you use those ground floors for parking or shops, I don't know what, or warehouse type space, and in 30 years. Seattle did this, by the way, years ago. They brought the ground plane up to the second floor of their buildings.
It floods now. It floods now. In a really heavy storm, if that area is a flood.
Yeah, nature's going to win out, probably no matter what. Yeah, so even if you try to culvert it and diverted underground. It's still going to go on for that. So, yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a better answer there. I wondered too, should we be looking at that area at all? Yes, go back.
Hi, we are a river city with not too much access to the river in a curious way. In all of your musings, did you think about, you just talked about some of the old Franklin Street and on the other side of the tracks, but did you think about a plan for that waterfront from the little inlet up to Parade Hill, something that might connect with the beautiful idea you have right here from the Allen Street School down to Basilica?
Yeah, I didn't draw it, but yes, I've thought about that a lot. So when you walk down Warren Street to Promenade Park, overlooking the river, you can only go left and right, south and north a little bit, and you can have real estate. So I want to get those pathways connected both ways. So in my second word scheme, if it's not too far away, is it before this?
And I should say, on the other side of Parade Hill, obviously, to connect over to the North Bay and to the Fuggery Shacks behind Kite's Nest, where you are right now. Yeah.
So I took a baby step here by suggesting that the sidewalk and pathway continues and would go all the way along this edge and here as well. That also has the potential as a site for maybe there's talking wildlife or a nature center. So this space could be seen as part of the North Bay wildlife.
Third Ave extension too. There's a lot of water there already, so maybe.
Third Street extension. Yeah, so we don't. The Oakdale Pond and let's see if I can find it. Put a delay on all these slides, so it takes a while to get through. Trying to get to the north side of town. Where are you? Okay, so if we build here, so this pond, it's actually, you only get a glimpse of it from this street here. There's a 6th Street extension there. And this whole area could be really beautiful. So I'm intrigued by the idea that if you build out here, that you maybe create a sense of a waterfront all through here, so that you end up with sort of two urban villages engaging a waterfront area.
Is that pond natural? Does it connect underneath?
There's a dam or a spring, right? Not on
Yes, it's spring fed at the northern or the uppermost part, and then
It's dammed here, right?
right.
And then there's some sort of a,
So once upon a time.
there's some sort of a trickle here. That when it rains, you start to see the rain.
Yes.
Other questions?
Does the cement plant have a complete total lot on that property? Will it ever be available?
I think aren't there like 30 or 40 years worth of materials in the quarry that they're going to be sending to it? So yeah, I think we're stuck with it now. Great, well, thank you guys. I hope you'll stick around and chat. We have some refreshments in the back, or we will in a few minutes. And I'll be signing books. Linda will be selling books, and love to meet some of you guys in person. Thank you.